Hello and welcome to our spoiler review for It. It is already chomping up box office records for horror movies, for R-rated movies. Legitimately the summer, or the movie hit that the summer needed. Desperately needed. We are here with your spoiler thoughts. I'm Dan Murrell.
And I'm Roth, Cornet, and it is a phenomenon.
It is a phenomenon, and before we even get started, I know that you clicked the title that said spoiler review, but we have to do this. This is your patented spoiler alert. We will be getting into very spoilery thoughts about the movie, about the book, about the miniseries. So, blanket warning, spoiler alert. We will be talking spoilers for the movie It. Roth, you got a chance to review it in a non-spoiler version on the channel here. I did not. I really liked this movie. Just for somebody that is very iffy about horror movies, this was not full of jump scares, which I liked. I love that it was about atmosphere. It was about tension. I thought that the visuals in this movie were disturbing, but not in that cheap way. And I have to say, like, this movie's like 2 hours and 15 minutes. It went by so much quicker than a movie like The Bye-Bye Man, which is 45 minutes shorter, but just feels like, oh my God, just get on with it. So I really like this movie, and I know that you did as well.
I did, and you're right. The pacing is right on target because there's a lot of story to get in. This is a massive book, and of course, this is only a portion of it that is covered in this film. The portion that focuses on the kids. I think that's the other thing, is that allowing their stories to unfold gave us a deeper connection with these children, allowed us to care more about the characters and sort of like the way that Pennywise is psychologically manipulating them. You saw this in a public screening, yes?
I did. I saw it in a packed, it was last night, opening night crowd, Thursday night crowd, as we're taping this on Friday. And yeah, this was a crowd that was on board with it. It was like a roller coaster ride. And like I said, it was fun to watch with this crowd because it's not just a jump scares where you hear everyone laugh. You hear people say, little things. And then when the big jumps do come, of course, there's that big release of tension. There was one thing in this movie that I love that I don't even think the people in my crowd love, but it just kind of goes to show the approach that they took with this, which is just how creepy they made not just the clown, but the entire town. You never knew what was the creepy pharmacist with the Lois Lane glasses. Like, that was one of the most audible reactions in my theater when it's like, oh, you look like Lois Lane. Everyone in my theater just went, ugh. So it's like the way they made everything so creepy. But even down to the little details, I noticed the scene where Ben Hanscom is in the library for the first time and he's flipping through the Dairy history book. Behind him, out of focus, there's a librarian shelving books, and as he opens the book, she turns, and every time it cuts back to him, you see her standing behind him, out of focus, and she's kind of standing like this and like staring at him while he's looking at the book, and then he closes the book, and it cuts back, and there's the balloon, but she's gone.
Yes.
And it's these little things of just like the atmosphere is what I think was so great about this movie. And not just about the gotcha scares, is there was so much disturbing imagery. And like you said, the way that Pennywise psychologically played with everyone in that town, even the kids' TV show, in the background, like telling kids to go play in the sewers, like I really liked how they approached it.
I think so. I love that as well. And it's funny with the librarian because Pennywise, as we know, is a shapeshifter. Where he frequents the clown image, but that's not the only thing that he can be. And it's like you don't know what and where he is. But the other interesting element of this is that Pennywise, just his presence in this town, has made people more violent, more dangerous, has brought out sort of ugly impulses. And you see that in Henry, the bully, and his friends. And you see, because they take it so much further than bullies normally would. And certainly with Beverly's dad, which is in the book as well. But the idea is that this evil has just, like in the sewers of this town, permeated everyone.
Well, when we were looking at doing the spoiler review, the way that we wanted to frame it, because so much, I think, of what we wanted to talk about spoilery also had to do with the book, the miniseries, and then this movie, kind of how they connect and the changes that were made from each version, because particularly the finale of the film, the climax, the way that they treat a lot of the characters are connected with changes that they made or reverted to from the book. So, we kind of frame how the movie works around those changes as we get into our spoiler thoughts. And one of the big changes comes right up at the beginning with Georgie, Bill's brother. In both the book and the miniseries, Georgie dies, but they find his body. He's gone. And one of the big changes this movie made right away was he's missing.
Yes.
He's just disappeared.
Yeah.
And I actually liked this change because I felt like it gave even more motivation, particularly for Bill. And I think they did a really good job with his character of kind of strengthening it beyond just kind of the stuttering kid who's traumatized by his brother's death. He's always been the leader, but I think that gave him that extra push over the edge, that motivation. It's not just it killed my brother, but hey, my brother might be out there and I got to go find him. And
the cool thing about that too is that the audience, I mean, we know that Georgie's dead, but the audience might wonder, is there some level of Georgie remaining? Is there some part of his essence that's still retrievable?
Yeah.
And it also creates a great tension between Bill and his friends, because he's convinced he wants to hold on to that last bit of hope that he can retrieve his brother. And they're just kind of like not wanting to say it, but they think he's dead and he's gone and there's no hope. So why are we going to go into the sewer to die for nothing? And it creates nice tension between them.
And it gives that great speech to the actor who plays Bill, who was last seen in the Book of Henry. This is a big jump up for him.
Yes, it is.
But he has that great speech in front of the house where he says, listen, I go into my house and it's cold and it's distant and no one talks to each other because my brother's just gone. And he's like, I'm less afraid of going into this house than going into that house. And I think that really just served his character that much more to cement him as the leader. So that was a change from the book and the miniseries that I thought worked really positively. Another change that a lot of people might have noticed is the leper scene, again happening in front of that house with Eddie. That is a kind of a famous scene in the miniseries. Is they kind of switch that out for the clown in the shower.
Yes.
Pennywise meets him in the shower. And, hello, Wheezy. And that's, for me, that was an intriguing change because I'm not sure why the miniseries would make that change.
Yeah.
The leper was the only one, maybe because it was a little too Walking Dead zombie-ish. Like, that wasn't one of the most effective parts of the movie for me. Although when it came back later, I thought it paid off a little bit more. But I think that is a really weird way of, like, I wonder why they made that change initially. Because that's a book thing that was changed for the TV show and now back.
So my guess about that is because that shower scene is so great, and that Tim Curry, look at him, was so iconic. Look, you and I both know that miniseries is not good.
It's really not. Tim Curry's great.
He's great.
And the kids stuff is pretty good. It's a great cast for the kids, and the adult stuff is not very good. And there's a thing with Pennywise that we'll talk about in a second, particularly the limitations of the television budget that really just blow the whole affair. I saw the miniseries. It's got nostalgia, but it's not great.
It's not good. But I mean, and this is the thing that I've always said about that is that it's not good, but what Tim Curry did was so indelible for me personally.
Yeah.
And Pennywise became sort of my most feared entity in the horror genre, even though the movie wasn't good, which just tells you so much about the strength of his performance. Yeah. So I think with this, there was an opportunity to really use the idea of playing on individual fears. And he is so afraid of germs and disease, but I will agree with you. And I think for a lot of people, that scene probably doesn't play because leprosy isn't necessarily a thing that we're afraid of. I feel like, why wouldn't he have like Ebola or something?
I mean, I get why he would be scared of sickness, obviously, because it manifests your biggest fear, and obviously his biggest fear is sickness. But that was something that just didn't quite play as effectively. Maybe it's because everything else played so well. The headless burnt kid in the library and the hands coming out, like those all played so strongly. I think that just kind of played as a weak link for me. But that is a change that was originally in the book, and I've read that, when Muschietti took over the movie, that was one of the things he said, we're putting this back in. Is this leper scene. I
would have switched the disease, but then they kind of got the image of Pennywise rising from the water in with him in the basement.
That's true, which is okay. There's one change that I did want to talk to that struck me as very curious, which is kind of the treatment of the character of Mike Hanlon and then Ben Hanscom. And they really kind of amped up Ben's role in this movie. He always had a big role, but Mike, I think you meet Mike very early in the movie, and then he kind of disappears for a big stretch of time and kind of comes back again in the middle. And what I found kind of odd about that was the idea of being the kind of group historian, like that in the books and the movies was kind of Mike's thing. Was he was the guy that knows the history of the town. He knows how everything is laid out. And in the movie, they gave that to Ben. Ben's the one that's doing the research. And these kind of changes happen all the time, but that was a little curious to me because of how Mike just disappeared in the movie to me. I thought that could have been something that they could have folded him into the narrative a lot quicker if they had given him that kind of heavy lifting. And I would be curious to ask, like, why was that change made? Because it did kind of isolate him even more, and he's kind of isolated from the narrative anyway. That's part of his character, but I do wonder why they took that kind of bit of business away from him and gave it to Ben when I felt like his character was kind of lacking in this movie.
I feel like with Ben, that to me it's actually organic that character would be the one that you just moved to town, you don't really have any friends, you're trying to figure it out, something weird is going on. What are you going to do but be in the library? And while you're in the library, you may as well research the history of this town. That's one reason too, is that there is this tension between Bill, Beverly, and Ben. And it sort of gives you more of a reason to connect with Ben, and it creates a deeper sense of tension in those it raises the stakes of those relationships. It's interesting though, Mike actually didn't have much to do at all in the movie.
No,
if you think about it.
It kind of felt like he was in the movie because he's got to be in the movie because he's the guy that brings them all together. But, I get that someone's going to get short shrift, but to take away business and he doesn't have a lot to do, like that's when I'm like, I think in the adaptation he's the character that kind of got the short shrift as they kind of change things around, and we'll talk about some things they changed around in a minute. That it's probably good that they did some adjustments because that book goes crazy nuts at the end. Pennywise, Bill Skarsgård, first of all, I think it's so hard to come out from under Tim Curry's shadow and do that character. And I think he really did bring an extra dimension to the character. But they let him do, in the book, Pennywise is he's Frankenstein. He appears as the creature from the Black Lagoon. Like he's a bunch of different things. This movie was like, no, by and large, he's going to be the clown. Or if he's something else, we see him turn back into
the
Pennywise.
Clown. Well, you're talking about the miniseries and the movie?
Yeah, I mean, the miniseries, too, was mostly Pennywise.
It was mostly Pennywise.
The book particularly, like, he's everything. Like, he when it says he takes on your greatest fears, it's like, if he's Frankenstein, werewolves, a shark, a creature from the Black Lagoon. Like, he's very much more, like, Pennywise is kind of his default guy, but he's much more of a shapeshifter.
So I feel like for the miniseries, we have to think of it probably pragmatically, too, right? Like, it was easier for them to have Tim Curry as Pennywise for most of the movie than to have so many different shapes, and that it just worked that he was so great as Pennywise, and that clowns are very menacing to almost all of us. Like, clowns are sort of now a primal fear, so it worked to scare all of the audience, because I'm probably not that scared of the creature from the Black Lagoon, for example. I might be scared of a shark. But that's the thing. Instead of targeting like mass, you're one image that is really unnerving, which is this figure of innocence that is distorted, which is a huge horror trope. Well,
and I want to talk about kind of what they did, that picture that we just saw. I think this is where the movie really had it over the miniseries, and it's just budget and technology, which is this movie nailed the creature of Pennywise, the fact that he is a face for this much more grotesque thing. And that Tim Curry thing is, again, that's TV in the 90s, and there's only so much that they could do. And I always thought that whenever it wasn't Tim Curry, it looked cheesy. It looked really corny and cheesy, and this I thought was terrifying when the teeth would come out and it would kind of reveal itself, like more than it ever did in the TV miniseries. I thought that finally nailed the terrifying creature. It nailed the creature part of Pennywise.
Tim Curry's performance is like really joyful. You know what I mean? He loves being Pennywise, and he loves menacing, and it's almost very human in a way, and whereas Bill Skarsgård's performance was very other. He felt very alien. You never knew what he was going to do. It was so erratic.
Well, and he did this great thing. The first time he did it was in the sewer scene at the beginning, but he did it a few other times where he would kind of be doing the Pennywise thing, and then you could just tell, like, he just would he'd just drop, and it would just like become this like dead vacant thing, and you're like, oh, like you see that the thing of just like, oh, this is a thing that I'm doing, and then like he just would become this dead-eyed, and that was just, that simple thing was so effectively scary, and a great performance adjustment from him.
I totally agree, because they're very different characters at that point. And I love what Tim Curry did, but this is a thing that, to your point, feels more like a creature that's imitating a version of a human.
Yeah.
You know, and like he does a great job at being a distinct, very frightening character against huge shoes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Big old clown shoes, exactly. So let's talk about the thing that they probably changed the most, which is the finale of the movie, for good and ill. I think a lot of people, I've read a few opinions saying that they're not exactly on board with Beverly being kidnapped and that being the impetus to go down in the sewers and confront Pennywise. At this point, they kind of, they added this narrative of the group splintering and they need this impetus to get back together. It did seem a little sudden to me. I didn't mind it, because I thought once they got down there, they were true to their characters. It felt a little contrived, but again, you're talking about adapting an 1,100-page book, and I could see how it's already 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I did like that they were giving them extra motivation. So it didn't bother me that much. It just kind of seemed to come out of nowhere. Like, why is Pennywise all of a sudden just in your house?
Yeah,
that was the most kind of cliche that I think it got. I thought it kind of subverted a lot of cliches, but that was the one that was just like, oh, and now he's going to get you and you have to go rescue her.
Well, okay, so she was basically the bait, right? And he was trying to get them all there so he could have one big meal, and in that way, it's like, she's the worm on the fish hook, and he's coming to get, in that way it does work, but I will say it give me pause for a moment, like, why wouldn't he just eat her right there? She's so delicious right now, and so full of fear, by herself. But
once they got down there, though, I loved the portrayal of just like Stan. And if I don't want to spoil it, I won't spoil what happens to Stan, because that's probably going to happen in the next movie. But I thought that it did set up a little bit more of why he does what he does moving forward. Once they got down there, I thought it was fine, and I was glad that she wasn't out of commission for the entire final battle. That they did bring her back. I liked how they visualize the "you'll float too," because I don't know if that's ever been really represented well. He says it always, but like the idea of like, oh, I get it. You know that this is kind of what he does. I thought that was a really creepy layer. But let's talk. The book. The way that it does the finale, before we get to the other thing, the way that it does the finale in the book with the kids is like there's parallel dimensions involved, and he meets a turtle named Matarin
created the
universe, and he learns this ritual that allows them to go to a multiplane dimension and does a battle of the wills, and like it is the most out. It's like you do. It's the most out there thing that Stephen King does. They didn't do any of that in the miniseries. They didn't do any of that in the movie, and I think that's probably a smart bet. I'm sure there's some Stephen King purists that are like, he didn't talk to the turtle. Yeah. Why did he not talk to the turtle? But I think smartly they said, okay, and we need to make this. And they didn't even give Pennywise the weakness of shooting it with it, because even in the miniseries they shoot him with a silver dollar and he's gone, and it's like, or earring or whatever it was, and it's like, really? I like that they gave them that chance for all of them to team up against them and defeat him together. Yeah.
Look, for me, Stephen King, I think, writes and has an incredible imagination, and he comes up with great stories, but often does not end them well. And the endings become insane. Crazy. And really convoluted and bizarre, and it sort of takes the air out of a lot of the tension that's been there, because the more we can relate to them, even as out there as Pennywise is, the more out there it gets and the harder it is to relate, the less scary it is. Yeah. So I think that they did well. And then there's another, we are doing a video about some of the craziest things that Stephen King has written. Yeah. And one of them is in the finale of this book, and it is the children all deciding to have sex together, but all of the boys with Beverly in order to reunite and escape the sewers.
It's the sewer orgy.
It's the sewer orgy.
Not in this movie.
Not in the movie.
Nor, I don't think, would it ever have been in this movie. Nor should it be. Nor should it be. Nor will it be. And I think Stephen King has even said, in retrospect, like, yeah, I wouldn't have done that today. I think a lot of people were wondering, how are they going to reference that? I think they sort of tease it. So they go to the quarry and they all swim together, and that's as in that direction as things get. Yeah. And as in that direction, and they're very young. It would be hugely disturbing
for an
and not to
audience.
mention X-rated.
And
no one under 17 would be
yeah.
ever admitted to that movie. Yeah, no, I think a lot of people are like, oh, is it going to be in the movie? Why would it ever be in the movie?
No,
of course it's not going to be in the movie. The theme of it, I think, was in the movie.
Yeah.
That theme of kind of awakening and the fact that after this experience, they will all be changed. They will never be quite the same. That's there. I think you could do that without going as creepy. The other thing that's not in the movie that people talked about is there's a Vision Quest scene that they have where they discover that, Pennywise is an alien who came on an asteroid meteor, and he's millions of years old, and he exists in the macroverse and is in another dimension. Again, not needed for this movie. It is interesting, though, to wonder, the movie ends with the title card, It, Chapter 1. So, obviously... and we know this, It Chapter 2 is on the way. I will be curious to see how out there is Chapter 2 going to go, because I don't think you're going to find many people that will disagree. The adult parts of the story are the least interesting parts.
They're so boring. The adult, but I was wondering about that too. Like those adult pieces are so boring that I think that It Chapter 2 becomes, that's where we get to learn more about Pennywise.
Right. More
than we spend time with the adults. It's the adults and we learn about Pennywise through them.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Like, are these origin pieces that we're not getting in this movie now going to be folded into Chapter 2? And I think, this wasn't really a radical departure from the original that much. I think that It Chapter 2, I would not be surprised if, other than the premise and some of the character setup, if Chapter 2 is a radical departure from Stephen King's, because so much of what he wrote with the adult parts is just
boring
or just so far out there. And I think that you've set a great precedent. Obviously, any sequel to this movie is going to have a lot of buzz. It'll be very interesting to see going forward what they do with It Chapter 2. Overall, Roth, spoiler thoughts aside, this is going to be a huge hit, obviously, and we're going to see a sequel, and I don't know. I enjoyed it. I hope that the whole team comes back for the sequel, and just beyond just a horror movie, I think this is one of the great psychologically disturbing movies I've seen in a while, but I will go ahead and say it's the best horror movie I've seen this year. Not that there was much competition, but I just respected what they did with the style of it and with the effective scares and the tone, and it just was the most artful and well-reasoned horror movie that I've seen. Annabelle Creation was a good roller coaster ride, and I enjoyed it for what it was, but this for me I thought was a really strong movie. Some flaws, not a perfect movie, but a really enjoyable.
For me, Get Out is one of my number one movies of the year, full stop. So to me that is like the best horror movie of the year.
I have a hard time calling that a horror movie.
It's true, because it's really more of a psychological drama. I agree. So if you're saying straight horror, I loved that. I really enjoyed this movie. It's not, listen, this isn't The Shining, and it's not, Shawshank Redemption in terms of Stephen King adaptations. Mm-hmm. But as far as a just strong, late summer, funny, enjoyable, entertaining popcorn movie goes, this is pretty good. And I hope that people are enjoying it. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do, and if they decide to hey, screw it, let's just get really weird with this and do the turtle, or if they adjust so radically and introduce the adults, yes, but also a new batch of kids or something like that. Moving forward into the sequel, it would be very curious to see what they do. Like you said, Stephen King purists probably want to see a straight adaptation, but the cool thing about adaptations is you can get two versions of a thing that you love.
Yep, that's great. So what do you think? Are they going to do the turtle? Are they not going to do the turtle? Did we tell you way more than you needed to know about book things and all macroverses and Pennywises and space aliens and crazy weird Stephen King sex scenes? Let us know in the comments below. Also, let us know what you thought of the movie. If there are any spoiler thoughts that you want to share, this is the place to do it. Until next time, I'm Dan Murrell.
And I'm Roth Cornet.
Thanks for watching.
Click here for more awesome Screen Junkies news and click the logo to subscribe.